I want to share with you just a fun story I heard as a child growing up in Texas. It's a story about a man named Cowboy. Well, that's what all of his friends called him anyway. He wasn't always known as Cowboy, though. When he was 19 years old and hired for his first real job, he was just Paul. When Paul started his new job, two fellas he worked with also happened to be rodeo riders. This was 1954, and at that time in Southeast Texas, there was a rodeo every Saturday night. So when the two friends invited Paul to watch them ride, he had never been to a rodeo before, he jumped at the chance. Now, here's how the rodeo worked. There were only 10 horses to ride, but always more than 10 cowboys showing up to compete. So each man paid $5 to enter his name into a raffle. And the good news is that if you didn't get to ride, you got your $5 back. Now, on this particular night, Paul's two friends showed up along with 13 other cowboys, making it 15 men and only 10 horses. So, kids, how many cowboys did not get to ride a horse? 15 cowboys, 10 horses. That's right, 5. Well, both of his buddies ended up getting raffled in. So, Paul sat and watched as both of his friends were thrown mercilessly to the ground. It was the scariest, most exciting thing he had ever seen. It was, unfortunately, though, neither of his friends lasted the necessary 8 seconds on the horse, so neither earned a share of the $50 prize. Well, Paul was hooked and went back the next Saturday. This time, however, he noticed that some of the other cowboys had figured out a way to increase the likelihood of winning the raffle. All you had to do was convince a few of your friends to enter the raffle along with you. And if they won and you didn't, refund them their $5 and have them transfer their horse to you. So that week, Paul paid that $5 to help out his friends' chances of winning the raffle. And guess what? He drew a horse. He walked up to the judge and explained that he didn't want to ride, but he wanted to pass his horse off to his friend. But the judge said, "Sorry, son, the rules have changed. Didn't you know?" And he pointed to a sign. The sign said, "If you pull a horse, you," in all capital letters, "you ride that horse." "And if I don't?" Paul asked. "Then you wasted $5, son." Well, Paul was only making 75 cents an hour, so $5 was quite a bit to squander, but he was terrified. Ride the rodeo? Paul had never ridden a tame horse, much less the wild one he had chosen. But his friends convinced him to try. They lent him a pair of cowboy boots, rigged the horse for him, and got him on top of the horse. His only instructions: hold on to the handholder, keep your feet out in front, spurs in, and when the bell rings, put up the other hand in the air, and the horse will do the rest. Well, Paul's heart was beating out of his chest, waiting for that bell to ring. But once it did, his arm went up, that gate opened, and he and that horse were off. It was the longest 8 seconds of his life, but he stayed on that horse. The pickup men, the men who help you off when you manage to stay on, got him off the horse into safety. And wouldn't you know it, everyone else was thrown that night. So Paul not only stayed on that horse, he won $50 for it. He went out the next day and bought his very own pair of cowboy boots for $20. And that's how Cowboy got his name. He would go on to become a minor celebrity rodeo rider in Texas and Louisiana, and he started taming wild horses on the side for extra cash. He even got to ride with the big boys at the 1960 Houston Livestock Rodeo, where Roy Rogers and Dell Evans were the hosts that year. Now, why am I telling you this story? Well, what strikes me is this. What if those friends had never come into Cowboy's life? Would he, in fact, be Cowboy? Would he have discovered this natural talent? We just never know when we meet people the impact they will have on our lives. Who in your life has helped you discover a talent or saw in you potential you didn't know you had? I had no idea when I met Kim Mason what her presence in my world would bring. Kim is my spiritual partner, which basically means that she is my accountability to the Spirit partner. Every week for over 10 years now, with the exception of vacations and unforeseen circumstances, every week we have committed to a 1-hour phone call. Even when I was on sabbatical in India, we checked in. We simply ask each other 2 questions weekly. How is your spirit? And where have you experienced the sacred or divine? The first question offers an opportunity for a general check-in, those things affecting our spirits and how we are feeling. We often process for the first time that week certain events that have brought us joy, pain, excitement, or challenge. Inevitably, we offer each other an affirmation or a different perspective, or just a needed long-distance hug. The second question helps us keep on track. Where have you experienced the sacred or divine? Those weeks when we cannot find an answer to that question, we know it's time to slow down and to allow ourselves to be more present with our world. The unexpected gift with 10 years of mindfulness in this area is that the depth and breadth of our understanding of the sacred has expanded. I think we could easily say that our relationship to God, to the divine consciousness, is much more central to our lives than it used to be. Kim and I have seen each other through great joy, deep sorrow, and everything in between. Job transitions, family challenges, breakups, breakdowns, and divorce. And through all of this, the context. How have these events affected our spirit? And where amid these joys and challenges have we experienced the sacred? Her voice and presence, her commitment to me, has influenced my life in ways that are still unfolding. No, I didn't become a rodeo rider, but because of her help in my discernment process, I did become a yoga instructor, which has been a priceless gift. And I helped her discern her call to the ministry. She is now the Reverend Kim Mason of the First Unitarian Church of St. Louis. I am hers, and she is mine. We are accountable to each other. Without this accountability, I do not believe either of us would have lived into the fullest expressions of who we are today. So, what does accountability require? As a person who was raised in a faith community that loved and nurtured me, I grew into an adult whose life call it is to help create and foster community. What I have learned in the 18 years of doing this work is that relationships are unsustainable without accountability, and accountability requires relationship. Well, durable and effective accountability requires relationship. As Unitarian Universalists, we aspire to remain accountable not only to our congregation, but also to our larger community and our environment. But when push comes to shove, we can't always be fully present to each of these responsibilities. And sometimes we are forced to choose. I aim to be accountable to my fellow human beings whose families are being torn apart by unjust and inhumane immigration policies. But if a member of my own family is in crisis, I will be present to them rather than join a demonstration outside the immigration court. My accountability to others is as strong as my relationship to them. There are 7 people in my life for whom I would drop everything to fly to their side because they are my most beloved. So when we think about serving others, we need to recognize the importance of building relationships before we can be reliably accountable to them. As both Reverend Jonathan and Reverend Taryn lifted up in recent weeks, Brian Stevenson says we must get approximate. And accountability is one reason for that. Instead of protesting outside, what if I were to visit a detainee on a regular basis? Hear their personal stories. Look into their eyes as they tell of the family members they had to leave behind. Listen to their fears and develop a relationship with them. Do I then feel more accountable to the work of immigration justice? You betcha. Of course, this requires time. Certainly when it comes to building relationships, accountability requires time. More precious than gold these days, yes, time. Kim and I commit to 1 hour a week. And in 10 years, given that we have missed some weeks here or there, that's still around 500 hours we have committed to each other. But I'm too busy. How do I carve out that kind of time? I often hear. Well, this could be a whole other sermon, but I will just say that busyness is the enemy of relationship building accountability. This cultural standard of productivity as self-worth is ruining our relationships. And I say this next part with love and concern. Busyness is a badge of brokenness. Brokenness in the systems that require too much of us, and brokenness in our beings when we feel ashamed of not being able to meet those unrealistic expectations. We must slow down and release some of those expectations if we are to act with accountability. Less activity, more love for ourselves and others. Accountability also requires a belief in something. My spiritual partner, Kim, and I believe that our outer lives are reflections of what is happening in our inner lives, and that it is crucial that we tend to the health and nurture of our minds and spirits. We know from experience that the better we care for our mental, emotional, and spiritual selves, the better we can rise to the unique challenges of being religious professionals. So, as I check in with Kim each week, I recognize that by holding her accountable to her inner self, I also help her stay accountable to the communities she serves, and she does the same for me. And that is the essence of our spiritual partnership. Now, how does this play out in groups? Well, communities that are the most successful are those who clearly define what they believe and set concrete expectations. And for our congregation, that would be our mission statement and our congregational covenant. When congregations clearly communicate the mission and uphold the covenant, Every member of the congregation knows what is expected of them and how to live in accordance with the shared values of their religious community. And if someone falls short of the mission or breaks the covenant, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, there are clear expectations to help bring that person back into covenant, back into accountability with the community. And of course, we can draw the circle wider to affirm our faith's covenant, the 7, possibly 8 UU principles that hold us in accountable relationship with our fellow Unitarian Universalist congregations. And finally, accountability requires integrity. It requires doing what you say you are going to do, and in that, acting within your values. When we are accountable, we keep our commitments. And that means not giving excuses when we don't follow through and not accepting excuses. Both are caustic to healthy relationships and healthy systems. Accountability expert Sam Silverstein, in his book, No More Excuses, explains that when we offer excuses for our negligent or hurtful behavior, we just add insult to injury. And when we accept excuses, we are enabling the other person. By letting them off the hook, we are essentially saying that it's okay to not fulfill your commitment to me. This is a breakdown in accountability. Offering excuses for our children instead of allowing them to own their actions is also detrimental to their integrity. Excuses may feel easy in the moment, but they compromise our integrity, especially as religious leaders. And on a related note, how about the excuses we tell ourselves, those personal saboteurs? How can we hold ourselves accountable when we sabotage our actions by giving in to those personal excuses? So some of my favorite personal excuses that derail me from holding myself accountable are, well, I'm too old. I'm too young. Someone else has already done it. And I'm just not an intellectual. So, what are some of your favorite personal excuses that keep you from doing what you need or even want to do? The other integrity piece is that we must strive to act within our values. For me, that means committing to self-study and self-reflection. What that has looked like most recently in my life is committing to my interfaith dialogue circle on racism that meets twice a month, having a consistent yoga practice, going to my therapist to work out my personal issues, and to name my obstacles, and journaling, which has been super helpful for me to see my narratives, the stories I'm telling myself, and how those narratives are either true or perhaps how my perspective needs to shift in order to align with my values and assist me in overcoming challenges. When we live with integrity, we can show up authentically. So when I've done the self-work, I can approach my calling in the world in ways that are useful, helpful, and hopefully less harmful. Relationship, time, a belief in something, and integrity are all at the heart of accountability. When we practice accountability, not only do we live into the fullest expression of ourselves, but we help others to do the same. I want to close this morning with an update on Cowboy. He is still alive at 85 and has now exchanged his cowboy boots for golf cleats. Some people still call him Cowboy, even though he hasn't ridden the rodeo in over 50 years. Some people call him Paul. I call him Dad. Hi, Dad. he's watching. His 85th birthday is actually tomorrow. Happy birthday. Dad has spent the last 25 years of his life as a lay prison minister, actually. His primary work at the prison every Sunday evening is to help socialize inmates who are in the acclimation unit or within 6 months of being released. He does this through conversation and telling jokes, and perhaps most significantly, through human touch. For those just meeting him, he will extend a hand. Eventually, most will gladly accept his handshake. Some will even allow him to hug them by the time they are released. Dad believes that people should not be defined by their mistakes. So he has been building relationships with inmates every Sunday for 2 hours for 25 years to prepare them for the outside world. Someone once asked him why he felt beholden or accountable to those men. My dad is a Christian, and I fully expected a response along the lines of, well, they're children of God, or it's what Jesus would do. His response, well, it's the right thing to do. Friends, can we do the right thing? Can we fully live into accountability and all that it requires? Can we hold each other accountable and live into our life call? Can you imagine a world where we joyfully step into accountability and lovingly hold those we serve, hold those with whom we are in relationship accountable? This is one way to change the world. I am yours, and you are mine. Blessed be.